Sometimes the line between real life and fiction gets blurred. It's very much the case regarding the life story of the current Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelenskyj. At the moment, he is a wartime president, leading his nation against the might of the Russian armed forces. But not long ago, he was an actor, more precisely a comedian whose sole job was to make people laugh. Over a few years, he has transformed from an actor into a symbol of Ukrainian defiance and democratic values against Russian imperialism. He is being hailed as the leader of the free world and defender of Western democracy. Hello and welcome back to our channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. So without further ado, let's get straight into this. Volodymyr Zelenskyj was born to a Jewish family in the city of Kryvyi Rih in 1978, a part of Soviet Ukraine at that time. Zelenskyj is a native Russian speaker and fluent in Ukrainian and English. He later went on to study law. However, he pursued acting and comedy as his career. He was active in the theater scene from his teenage years and also formed a performance group known as Wartime 95. The performance group was named after the locality of Kryvyi Rih, where Zelenskyj lived. Wartime 95 achieved international fame as it regularly appeared on the comedy show Club of the Funny and Inventive People. Later on, Zelenskyj co-founded a production company named Studio Wartime 95, becoming one of the most successful and entertaining production houses in Ukraine. The highlight of Zelenskyj's comedy career came when he starred as Vasily Petrovich Goloborodko, a 30-something high school history teacher of modest means, in a satirical show named Servant of the People. A profane diatribe of Goloborodko against widespread corruption in Ukraine is recorded by a student and goes viral. The high school teacher unexpectedly goes on to win the election. The teacher-turned-president finds navigating the world of politics difficult, but is determined to serve his nation. The show was extremely popular in Ukraine and went on to play the role of a stepping stone in his political career. He registered a political party named after the show and contested elections against the incumbent billionaire president Petro Poroshenko in 2019. Zelenskyj contested elections on an anti-corruption narrative and went on to win an unexpected landslide victory by gaining a 73% vote. He was criticized for his lack of experience. His critics also labeled him a populist who was using the sentiments of people for his political benefit. He was also criticized for having close relations with billionaire oligarch and media tycoon Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky owned the TV channel for which Zelenskyj worked. Kolomoisky is also accused of large-scale financial scams in Ukraine and is in exile. Therefore, Zelenskyj tried to distance himself from Kolomoisky after getting into office. Zelenskyj assumed the presidency of Ukraine, surrounded by grave problems from all sides. Corruption was endemic, widespread, and deep-rooted. The economy was not picking pace, and the country was dominated by a handful of powerful and wealthy oligarchs. However, the greatest challenges of all emanated from a hawkish and powerful Russia. The Crimean Peninsula, which was a part of Ukraine, was annexed by Russia in 2014. Russian-backed separatist proxies continued to wage war against Ukraine in the eastern Donbas region. Vladimir Putin's Russia had long sought a favorable regime in Ukraine. Russia views its immediate neighborhood as its sphere of influence and wants to keep it away from Western influence. However, Ukraine wanted to align itself more strongly with the Western world. It wanted to secure membership in NATO and European Union. Many other Russian neighbors have attained EU and NATO memberships over the years. Historically, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union and emerged as a nation-state only in 1991, with the dismemberment of the USSR. Due to reasons deeply rooted in history, geography, and geopolitics, Putin wants to keep Ukraine out of the Western sphere of influence and under his thumb. Russian-backed proxies have been fighting against Ukraine since 2014 in the eastern Donbas region. Western intelligence agencies reported that Russian military buildup on the Ukrainian border and naval buildup in the Black Sea started at the end of 2021. It was reported to be a precursor of a full-fledged invasion by Russia, a claim refuted by the Putin administration. However, despite the denials, Russia launched a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Russian strategists and generals expected Kyiv to fall within days. However, the unexpected resilience and fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people and military forces under the heroic leadership of Zelenskyj has prevented an overall collapse till now. Russian forces have been halted in their tracks on many fronts. Russian jets continue to bomb civilians and military targets across Ukraine. Russian forces have destroyed many cities and towns in the country. According to the UN, the invasion has resulted in more than 14,000 deaths. War has also created the biggest refugee crisis in recent history, with 13 million people escaping for their lives. At the same time, Russian ground forces continue to hold large swaths of land in the southern and eastern parts of the country. But unexpected resilience of the much weaker and outnumbered Ukrainians has perished the Russian ambition of a quick victory. Ukrainian forces have repulsed the Russian assault on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. A great deal of Ukrainian resistance to the Russian offensive can be attributed to the strength and leadership of comedian-turned-president. He refused offers of personal evacuation by Western allies and retorted that he needed arms, not a ride. He continues to boost the morale of his nation through the smart use of social media. He regularly posts videos of himself and his leadership in Ukraine, assuring his people that they have not escaped and they mean to put up a fight. In his addresses to the UN Security Council and NATO, he has severely criticized the institutions for their inability to stop aggression against his country. He demanded the US president and NATO allies establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. However, this demand was rejected, as it had the potential to escalate the war further and turn it global. The US president did not want to risk World War III or a possible nuclear exchange. USA, UK, and other Western allies have flooded Ukraine with light anti-tank weaponry and surface-to-air missiles. However, Zelenskyj wants heavy artillery, fighter jets, advanced rockets, and drones to turn the tide in Ukraine's favor. The USA has pledged military aid worth $700 million to Ukraine. Zelenskyj has also asked Western countries to tighten their economic sanctions against Russia. The USA and its allies have slapped heavy economic sanctions on Russia. However, Russia has used various financial channels to circumvent the sanctions. Sanctions have damaged the Russian economy, but will they be enough to force Russia to reconsider its Ukraine strategy is still an unanswered question. European countries rely heavily on Russian oil and gas for their energy security and continue to buy them from Russia. On the other hand, large economies like China and India continue to buy Russian oil at discounted rates, reducing the impact of economic sanctions on the country. Moreover, the unavailability of Russian oil for most countries due to sanctions has led to the global oil price increase, which will increase inflation across the globe and further complicate the supply chains recovering from the impact of COVID-19. The Russia-Ukraine conflict also can create a global food shortage. Ukraine is a major supplier of grains and oilseeds. Currently, major Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea are under Russian control, and Russia is not allowing the export of Ukrainian food supplies from these ports. This blockage has the potential to severely damage food security across the globe. Grain and cooking oil prices are already going up globally. Therefore, it is of utmost global importance to end the conflict in Ukraine. So far, Ukraine has been able to resist Russia due to a potent mix of Ukrainian strength, Western support, and the brave leadership of Volodymyr Zelenskyj. Now it is likely that Russia will be forced to the negotiating table, and a sense of peace may return to the region. The Ukrainian nation seems to have defended its independence and sovereignty against mighty odds. Ukraine has proven that a much mightier enemy can be stopped with sheer determination, courageous leadership, and a healthy dose of outside help from allies. Ukraine's story of resistance and defiance is a source of hope for other weaker countries, nations, and groups who are resisting the dominance of actors much more powerful than themselves. On the other hand, Volodymyr Zelenskyj has proved himself a man of crisis and a statesman worthy of international praise and applause. His story tells us that sometimes experience is not everything. Victory at certain junctures of history is determined by determination and strength of character, rather than the experience of the political leadership. As William Shakespeare said, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Zelenskyj was not born great. Fate and history placed him in extraordinary circumstances, and his resilient response to those circumstances thrust him into a position of international admiration. However, the tests of Volodymyr Zelenskyj and the Ukrainian nation are far from over. Russian troops continue to control large parts of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions in the country's east. Russian offensive in the east continues, and Western allies continue to supply more sophisticated weapons to Ukraine, so no side is likely to gain a clear victory. Thus, it seems possible that conflict resolution may happen at a negotiating table. Zelenskyj will have to show the same grit, determination, and tenacity he has shown on the table as he has shown on the battlefield. The Russian offensive has destroyed Ukraine's economy and infrastructure. The real challenge will be the post-war reconstruction and recovery. The major part of this challenge will be to resettle the refugees who return to their homes. The good news for Ukraine is that Russian hostility seems to have united and charged the Western world. Ukraine will have to capitalize on international support and help from allies to rebuild the country as quickly as possible. The life story of Volodymyr Zelenskyj is purely fantastical. What do you think other countries can learn from the conflict in Ukraine? How can we avoid such catastrophic wars in the future? And what factors make a great leader? Is it experience or strength of character? Do you believe that Volodymyr Zelenskyj has proven himself as good a politician as an actor? Let us know your views in the comments section. That is all for today. We will see you soon with more informative and exciting videos. Goodbye.